Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to The Quarterdeck, the podcast that's going to take you deep into the heart and the soul of the United States Marine Corps. I am your host, Gunnery Sergeant Miguel Saenz, better known as The Gunny, and I am thrilled to have you alongside with me this week for another great episode that is going to be packed with Marine Corps tales and the incredible stories of brothers in arms. Today, we have a true Marine Corps legend in our midst. I want you to brace yourself for an episode that's going to leave you with a deep sense of pride and admiration. We're sitting down with a man who not only was a mentor to me and is responsible for the long and industrious career that I had on active duty. He is a legacy that is etched in the annals of the Marine Corps history. That's right, warriors. Gunnery Sergeant Walter Ramos is in the house. Now, before we dive into the epic journey of Gunnery Sergeant Walter Ramos, grab a chair, a cold beer, or whatever floats your boat, and get ready for a ride down memory lane through the experiences that have molded this Marine into the leader that he is today. Gunnery Sergeant Ramos isn't just any Marine. He's a living embodiment of the Marine Corps values of honor, courage, and commitment. From the hallowed grounds on Parris Island, South Carolina, to the unforgiving terrains of the combat zones, his story resonates with the heartbeat of the Corps. In this episode, we're going to explore the camaraderie, the challenges, and the triumphs that define Gunnery Sergeant Ramos's Marine Corps journey. So get ready for tales from the trenches, the moments of levity in the barracks, and the unbreakable bonds forged in the front lines. It doesn't end there. I want you to stick around as we uncover the layers of the Marine's character in the post-service chapter of his life. Gunnery Sergeant Ramos continues to exemplify the Marine Corps ethos as he impacts the lives of those around him, leaving an incredible mark on the Marine Corps community. So lace up your boots, turn up the volume, and join me, Gunny Saenz, as we look into the journey of Gunnery Sergeant Walter Ramos on the Quarterdeck. This is not just a podcast. This is a Marine Corps experience. Get ready to be inspired, motivated, and filled with the unmistakable Marine Corps pride. Hurrah! Welcome to the Quarterdeck with Gunny Saenz.
Drop and give me 25. I'm the Gunny.
It's time for the gunny.
The Quarterdeck. Lights. Get online right now. You got 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Hello, my bunch of knuckle-dragging, beer-drinking, hard-charging devil dogs. You're listening to The Quarterdeck. I am your host, Miguel, the Gunny Saenz.
Get off the bus!
I do solemnly swear. That I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States. Against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
The Quarterdeck.
We have an incoming interview on the Quarterdeck.
From now on, you will speak only when spoken to, and the first and last words out of your filthy sewers will be...
All right, everybody, this is the moment and the time that we have been waiting for. I want to welcome Gunnery Sergeant Walter Ramos to the podcast. How are you doing today there, Gunny?
Hey, I'm doing amazing. I am humbly honored by just the invitation, but especially honored by the introduction. I don't think, obviously, I don't think it's warranted, but man, I really appreciate it. It sounded really good.
It's got to be warranted. I mean, look, just so everybody knows and gets a little bit history of myself and Gunnery Sergeant Ramos. When did we first meet, Gunny? Do you remember the first time we met?
I came off the drill field in 2002 and checked into Romeo Battery. I came back to 511 to Romeo Battery, and we met shortly after that. So that was in probably 2002, 2003 when we met.
Yeah, I remember that it was then because that was when I was still attached to Sierra Battery. And then I had orders to go to the drill field. So they sent me to Romeo Battery because they said, hey, we'll send you to Romeo and you'll go to the drill field from then. Even though my check-in date was April 1st. April Fool's Day to me, right? Because
Exactly.
I ended up deploying and heading down there to Iraq.
And having an amazing time, right?
That is very, very true. We had a great time down there. So speaking of Iraq, we're going to get into that here in just a minute, but I want to talk a little bit more about what you've been doing since you actually retired from the Marine Corps. What have you been up to? What's going on lately in your life?
Right now, my son and I started a podcast called Talks with Pops, and it doesn't really deal with any really Marine Corps related issues. It's more of my son and I's unique story. And through, and we talk about differences between generations, like how things were during his generation, how things were through mine, about everything from social media to dating to what's considered manhood now, what's considered manhood then. So, the Marine Corps stuff come up every now and then, but it's mostly just a deep dive through the different generations.
Now, speaking of your podcast, I got to tell you, I spent the past couple of days binging and listening to Pops talking with his son. And I got to tell you, some of the topics and everything you talked about, man, they hit home because, being in the Marine Corps, and you talk about, in one of your episodes, you talked about having all your kids and all this stuff and everything else. If you remember back in Romeo Battery when I first was there with you, good God, I had a freaking fire team that I had with me during that time. So, we kind of blended in together during that time because of what we had together. But yes, I got to agree, some of the topics that you have on there, even though they're not Marine Corps related, you do use your time that you spend in the Marine Corps to kind of elaborate and bring all that home into that. And especially relating that with your son, man, I mean, he's got a great understanding of what it meant for you to be on active duty those many years. And now that you guys have this time to rekindle the relationship and become much closer, it just makes it even that much better. So congratulations. Yeah, congratulations on the podcast, and I wish you the best of luck. And those of you guys that don't know, remember, the podcast is called what there, Gunny?
Talks with Pops.
Talks with Pops, and you can find that on any of the podcasting applications that is out there. I will make sure that I'm going to help and promote that on my podcast, most definitely, because it's something that you guys will more definitely have to go out there and listen to, because it's going to bring you into more of the home environment with everything that he does. Well, let's go ahead and let's talk about the Marine Corps. Let's talk about,
Let's do it.
First, we talked about how we first met each other, and that was back down there in Romeo Battery. And I got to say, yeah, it was in 2000. Yeah, it was in 2002, because in 2004 is when we came back and I headed off into the drill field.
Right.
Now, and I can remember, because when I was down there getting ready to go to the drill field, because I got down to Romeo ready to go, you were one of the ones that always kept telling me, hey, follow your dream, do what you want to do, go out there and do the great things. Even though I had some people talking negatively, saying, oh, you ain't going to make it, this, that, and whatever. I'm going to shut them people up, and I'm going to go out there and do what I got to do. Definitely it was, I got to say that, the inspiration and the motivation that you showed me to get out there and do what I have to do to make sure that I would go out there and inspire all these young Marines and everything. Even though I went to MCRD in San Diego, you call it the Hollywood era, but hey, I don't care. It doesn't matter. At true at heart, I am a parasailing Marine. Unfortunately, parasailing wasn't good enough to get me. So I ended up having to go to San Diego.
And I will 1000% second your motion. Whoever got you was going to get an outstanding Marine that was going to do everything he could to better the lives of those recruits and make them great Marines. So in that aspect, I will 100% agree with you. I may not agree with you on how the two depots are viewed. Obviously, my vision may be a little skewed because I came from like the real depot, but whatever. We ain't gonna get into that.
I can agree with you. I mean, yes, I guess I had the best of both worlds, because I was a recruit down there in parasailing, South Carolina, and I got down there to go see what was so big and great about being down there at MCRD in San Diego. And I got to tell you, the one thing I didn't miss was the freaking sand fleas. I did not miss those, but the hills, I hated the freaking hills. That was one I did not mind. I miss walking around a empty flight path or flight area down there in the air wing down there, because going up those hills freaking sucked. Carrying those freaking packs and stuff like that, they were a pain in the butt, and I hated that stuff. But let's not get off track. Let's start back, back talking about Iraq. As many of you guys know, I've been following the story of the book that I've been going through with the 1st Marine Division in Iraq of 2003, No Greater Friend, No Worst Enemy. And, we have the great opportunity, not only that I was part of that actual combat environment, but also Gunny Ramos was there with me. Him and I were actually deployed with the same unit when we went down there in Romeo 511 at that time. Now, if you can remember where we were when we found out that the towers were hit by a plane? Do you have to remember where we were at the time?
Yes, I was actually on the drill field when it happened.
Because you were on the drill field and you got there right afterwards, because I know we were down in 29 Palms. I was still with Sierra Battery, and we were down there, and I had my little, I guess it was my little 5 or 10 inch little black and white TV with rabbit ears on it that I took to the field, and that's where we watched everything that was going on. And then once I got down there to Romeo, that's where me and you kind of connected, and we were able to go down there and, start making our relationship and our preparations to get ready to go down there to Iraq. Now, if I can recall, you were selected as one of the few to go down there in the advanced party to go down to Iraq.
Yes, I was the advanced party that became the late party, for lack of a better word. I left a week. Matter of fact, I remember I left on Super Bowl Sunday. I got a call that morning from the first sergeant, and he was like, hey, brother, I'm about to crap all over your head, and you're gonna have to smile and take it." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And he was like, "Hey, I need a section to go down advanced party to Iraq to get ready for the main body to come in." And he said, I need you here at whatever time. I think it was 1800. I need you here by 1800. Grab a few of your Marines, at least 5, and meet us down here. And you guys got to take off tonight.
Yeah, and I can remember too because it was Super Bowl Sunday, so we were pretty tipsy. That was when the Raiders got spanked by Tampa Bay. That was the year that they got literally spanked.
I didn't miss a thing. I didn't miss a thing. It was a great Super Bowl to miss. I tell you that.
No, it was that, but and then because I remember when you guys left advanced party, we got the phone call the next following day and say, "Hey, start getting your stuff packed, get ready to go. We're going to be heading over there to the barracks, and we're going to be staying in the barracks, waiting for our buses to take us down to the airport to get ready to head down there." And I can vividly remember that when we finally got on those buses and we headed down there to the airport, we get to the airport. And Lord and behold, who do we see there still laying at the airport there about almost a week later? But Gunny Ramos and his little section still hadn't left to head into Iraq.
Yeah, it was a nightmare. It was a nightmare. We sat there and watched unit after unit come and go, come and go, come and go. It was some kind of manifest problem. They couldn't get us on. And I had to sit there and watch my battery come in, get on the plane and leave, and me and my section was still standing there. It was definitely heartbreaking.
Heartbreaking as it was, though, it must have been, I won't say an adventure, but if I can remember, there were some pretty exciting things that happened to you guys while you guys were flying down there and actually finally made your way into Kuwait. Do you remember that time when you guys got ready to land in Kuwait?
Yeah, the door came off the plane.
Yes, I remember the door flew off the plane. And I could just imagine what was going through your mind. Like, oh, dang, they already shot us down.
I was like, come on, man. I waited a week and a half to get on an airplane to go to Iraq, and it's going to end right here on the runway. It was crazy.
Oh, yeah. I can imagine. Was it when you were going down on the runway, or were you guys still pretty high coming down?
No, we were on descent at the time, and all of a sudden we just we was on a C5, I believe. We weren't even on a C-130. We was on a C5, and the door just blew off of it. Luckily we were close to touching the runway, so we weren't high up where it could have affected us really bad, like suck somebody out or something like that, like you see in the movies, right? So yeah, luckily we were low enough to where it didn't really impact us that much. It just definitely scared the crap out of all of us.
Oh no, definitely. I mean, I can imagine. I mean, I know how those freaking, those Air Force pilots are. They freaking, when they land. It's like a big old zoom straight down, and then they're on the runway. So, so luckily when that door flew off of your plane, you were going to be going down pretty quick. But yeah, I can definitely imagine the
one way or another. One way or another, we're going to go down really quick. Yeah, you're right.
Oh yes, definitely. Oh yeah, but I remember, I think it was Medina at the time when we finally linked up together back there in because I think it wasn't until we got to Camp Matilda that we all got back together again when you guys finally showed up. And then you got there and they're like, "Dang, you guys already got your guns and your trucks?" I'm like, "Yeah, sorry, you missed the party. We have to go pick them up ourselves."
Yeah, and then I got all the worst equipment, right? I got all the worst. Matter of fact, I don't want to get too ahead of the story, but as we was taking off, going, crossing the LD in order to start laying down the initial fire on South Warren Hill, right before we crossed the LD, I was actually towing a dead gun. And they had, they pulled up next to me with my actual gun. We pulled off to the side of the road. We switched them off, and then I actually pulled up, and that's the gun I used when we actually started doing prep fires, but before the initial invasion.
And that's one of the things that I used to always think about a lot, because they have all this equipment and all these gear on the MPF ships out there floating down in the middle of freaking nowhere. And how long has that equipment been on these ships? And there's not that many Marines on board there to actually maintain the equipment and all that stuff. Because when we got there, I think we got some of the oldest M1908 howitzers that they had at the time. That we got
No, we
those
did.
things, and not only that, I mean, I believe, we got the new 7 tons. We got the 7 tons when they first had come in, so we all had 7 tons. But back then, they had no armor. There was no armor
No.
on these vehicles, so our armor was nothing but sandbags that were stacked in layers of 2, and that was supposed to stop a bullet from coming through the back of the truck to the Marines. Not only that, but do you remember that they fell short on the SAPI plates?
Yes. So we either had to pick a front or a back.
Oh yeah.
And we did wind up getting some armor like on the Humvees and everything, but I think it was Oshkosh, I want to believe. It was some company like that we had to take our Humvees and they kind of just makeshift put armor on the Humvees and then the Humvees we had weren't meant for armor, so the vehicles were breaking down. It was a nightmare. It was a nightmare. We made it through. We made it work in true Marine Corps fashion, right?
No, definitely. And I think,
For
adapt,
sure.
overcome, right? That's all we can do. But yeah, definitely, I can remember, thinking, you're like, damn, I'm like, hey, do I want the front or the back? What do I want more protected? I'm like, well, I'm not going to run away.
No.
For one, I'm
No.
not running away, so I'm going to put the SAT plate in my front. And I told the other Marine, hey, you just get to me back to back, and when you walk backwards, I'll walk forwards, and we're going to be protected either way. But yeah, that sucked. That sucked having to pick a side of which area you wanted to wear your SAPI plate on. I mean, not only that, but it's just that, everybody that went there in 2003, none of us, the majority of us, had no combat experience at all whatsoever.
You're absolutely right. None of us did.
I mean, none. I think our master gunnery sergeant that we had in the battalion, I forget his name, but he was the only one that was down there from actual Desert Storm. And I remember that he talked to all of us together as a battalion. He talked to us and kind of told us what he went through when he was down there in the first Gulf War, and how he lost one of his friends and all that stuff and everything, that he wanted to make sure that we were mentally prepared to ready to go. And I don't think that us as Romeo Battery, that we had any issue with not being prepared, because our first sergeant at the time, he made sure that we were prepared.
Absolutely.
And he made sure that we knew everything we need to know, and if we didn't, he made sure he punched it into you.
Oh yeah. You were going to get the point one way or another. And I believe our battery gunny at the time, he had a Gulf War experience.
Back then, it was Gunner
Verdugo.
Sergeant Verdugo, right?
He was in the Gulf War. He was a younger Marine at the time, but yeah, he had some experience. Matter of fact, he had retired, or not retired. He had started the retirement process, and then the war broke out, and then he actually pulled his retirement papers and came with us.
Yeah, I remember, because his wife gave him hell over that. At the time, she was really upset that he was going to go deploy and go into combat and not retire during that time. And I think if I remember correctly, he deployed either once or two more times after that. That he ended up staying in a little bit later, and so he deployed again. But with all that being said, so now we finally found out that you finally made it into Iraq. You finally got there. You took the slow little yellow school bus plane to get you to Iraq. And now we're ready to go in Matilda. And you mentioned that your howitzer was pretty much one of the most crappiest ones that you had, because it was just a paperweight that was there going into across the area there. With that, so kind of walk us through a little bit of your experience, because right now in our book, we're going through basically now that we're making our way through the Euphrates and the Tigris River, going across into Iraq. Do you remember any special days during that time?
The one story I remember, and me and you briefly spoke on this the other day, was, if you remember, initially it was just go, go, go. We were trying to keep up, because the battlefield was moving so rapidly that we kind of outran our supply lines. So we finally got an opportunity to pull over to a refueling point, a restocking point. And we got to pull in, get some MREs, get some fuel, get some sleep, and then get ready to punch out the next morning to a location where we could kind of set up and just wait for everything to catch up and then keep going. And it's a real funny story. So we get there in the middle of the night, we offload. Obviously, the first thing you do is get accountability, set security, and then we lay down and go to bed. So I had never heard the call to prayer before. So imagine being in the pitch dark, 0 dark 30, and all of a sudden you just hear just this chant going, and I'm wide awoke. I had my eyes open, but it's so dark, no moon that night, so it was like I was still with my eyes closed, and I was scared to move. I said, "Man, did something happen in the middle of the night? Am I alive?" And this is what I'm thinking in my head. And I was laying with my driver was laying next to me on this tarp we had laid out, and he says, "Staff Sergeant, are we dead?" And I just started dying laughing because that's exactly what I was thinking in my head. But that's one of the memories I have, just a funny one, right? But memories of uh the actual engagement of combat and us doing our job. I just remember it being a frantic pace. I remember no rest, no sleep, and just trying to keep my Marines motivated and try to keep myself motivated. Right, I had never been in that environment before. That's what we do. We train for it all the time, but it's a big difference between training for it and actually being in it and adjusting to it. All the fogs of war that they talk about, just the confusion, the unnerving sights and sounds. It's definitely a different experience.
No, definitely. I can agree with you because, remember we crossed over that line and they wanted us to be, we're at MOP level 3, I believe.
Correct.
We're at MOP 3. We had boots, pants, jacket on, and we just had our gloves and gas mask on our side, but we were ready to go. It was miserable. It was freaking humid.
It was.
It was humid. And, getting into March, once we crossed that border on the 21st of March and the 23rd, we had a freaking massive rain/dust storm that came through, and until this day, I don't understand. Well, I don't even know how it was even possible for us to shoot because we were shooting off an aiming post. How the heck was it the aiming post the only thing that we could actually see?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. Yeah.
That's all we could see, but we were able to engage the enemy, but we couldn't see anything else. We couldn't see in front of us.
And remember, we were doing so many speed shift missions, our traverse missions, that we had to have 2 sets of them. We had to have a set to the front and then to the rear because we had to make sure we can see them. So it was definitely challenging. That was a very challenging time for all of us.
No, definitely it was. It's just that even now it makes me, for some reason, something out there made us to be sure that we were able to see what we needed to do. Because, for me, it was the most important thing was to make sure that every Marine that went out there with us came back.
Exactly.
That was the most important thing. And we needed to make sure that that's what was going to happen to allow us to do that. So yeah, to me as well, just like you're saying, never been in that kind of environment. It was new to us. And I think that even with myself, along all the other Marines as well, that very first mission that we shot, when we engaged Saffron Hill, 30-round mission, the wrap rounds, 8 super stick charges. I think after the first 15 rounds, we're like, okay, we're good. We got our taste of combat. Let's go home.
I know.
We're good. I mean, because it was an amazing sight to see the whole entire regiment, every gun shooting 30 rounds of wrap. To me, it looked like a freaking battle of Star Wars. You see a bunch of lasers just going everywhere. That's what it looked like.
Yeah, it definitely did.
And just to understand that, hey, those rounds are impacting somewhere.
Exactly.
They're impacting on someone.
Yep.
So it's something that I talk to my listeners all the time about. That it's a lot of people that haven't been in that kind of situation or that kind of an environment, and sometimes they really don't understand because the Marines or any particular service member. But I only speak in experience of the Marine Corps because that's all that I really know. That
Correct.
We don't like sharing stories. We don't like doing anything else unless it's another Marine that was there with us that they understand exactly what we went through because, hey, they went through that same kind of situation, so they get it.
Exactly. And I'm just like you in that aspect. I know when I first got back, because oddly enough, I came back advanced party as well, but I actually got there before you guys this time. But anyway, when I got back, I just remember I didn't want to speak to anyone that was there on Camp Pendleton when we came back, because to me, if you hadn't been and seen where I had just been and seen, I didn't even want to speak to you. It took me a while to kind of get over that, and even with family members, obviously everybody wanted to know, hey, how was it? How was it? How was it? what do you tell them? Like, how do you explain to them what it was? Only your brothers that were there and suffered with you and saw what you saw and had their experience that you experienced. Like, only they will understand. To this day, unless it's someone that was there with me or I know was there at the same time as me, there's really no way for me to relay what my experience was.
No, definitely. I definitely agree 100% because even till now, I mean, after I left 511 there with you and I went to the drill field and then I came back, I went back to 511 and that's where I did my other 2 deployments that I did down there with Tango Batter and then my last deployment that went into Afghanistan. And you're definitely, I couldn't agree with you more. It's very difficult to be able to talk to other people besides those that were there with you because they really don't understand. They don't understand, what you're going through and what it means to you, to be able to share these stories with somebody else. Because if I tell somebody a story about what happened or anything like that, they're gonna be like, what? I'm like, why is that important? What does that mean? And they don't get it. They don't understand it. And I think that's what makes us unique when it comes to each other.
Yeah, and especially just what you said a little while ago about the sandstorm. That sandstorm lasted 2 or 3 days. How do you explain to someone that wasn't there what it was like to live in those kind of conditions for 3 days where you can barely see you don't see the sun, but you have to do your job. You have to move around. You have to keep people around you motivated. You have to maintain accountability. You have to keep your focus on the mission. How do you explain that to somebody that wasn't there? There's no way they could understand.
Well, I can definitely agree, and now that I'm retired from the Marine Corps, then I did my successful little 20 years of service, and me living down here in Arizona, in Yuma of all places, it looks just like freaking Iraq and Afghanistan. So I didn't go too far because I got sandstorms up the butt over here.
You're a better man than me. You're a better man than me, brother. I couldn't have done it.
It just takes some getting used to, but it's gotten better throughout the years, and just like you said, the deployments are different, a different experience for everybody, and that's just what they're going to have for the rest of their lives and how they're going to share it and everything. But especially I think what a lot of the listeners like to hear and understand is you now retired from the Marine Corps, 20 years of service. Yes, I did 20 years of service too, but it was because of Marines like you that inspired me, that wanted to stay, and especially out there in the drill field. Man, I couldn't thank you enough. I couldn't thank you enough for what I went down there and I was able to do, because I can remember when I came back, when I had a weekend off or something, that I was able to go back to Camp Pendleton, and we were at the basketball court playing basketball. And I walked up and you're like, who the hell is this? You couldn't even recognize. You're like, who are you?
But listen, but you have to. It's a never-ending cycle in the Marine Corps, right? While I appreciate all your kind words and all your appreciation for what I did for you, I'm only passing down what Marines before me did for me. Because the reason there's a GySgt Ramos is because someone poured into me. Somebody saw something in me. Somebody mentored me. Somebody showed me the right way to go. Somebody gave me those encouraging words. So all I did was pass the torch, so to speak, right? So as a Marine, you're especially a senior Marine, sergeant or above, whatever you want to call it, as a leader, it is your responsibility to pass on everything that was passed on to you and more, right? Because it does you no good to hold on to a secret. It does you no good to gain this experience and do nothing with it, right? So just as you thank me, I have to turn around and thank all the people that did the same thing for me that you say I did for you.
Now, definitely. And I think that's one of the most important things that we have in the Marine Corps, is that we care so much about our history, our traditions and everything. And that kind of ties everything together. A couple of months ago, I had a podcast that we discussed the Marine Corps birthday and what it actually means to celebrate that birthday. The cake cutting ceremony is what comes to mind to me, because it's the passing of the knowledge from the oldest to the youngest Marine. That all that knowledge that we share, because just like you said, we don't want to keep a secret. Everything that I know, I make sure that everybody underneath me knows, and they understand how to do my job, because when I'm not there, they need to make sure that they're able to take care of it. And I think that's one of the most important things, especially in the Marines. Everybody is capable of taking anybody's position. Just because I'm a corporal doesn't mean I can't do a staff sergeant's job, and so forth and everything else. Because during my time that I spent in Fort Sill as an instructor down there in the artillery training school, if you weren't a staff NCO, you weren't even considered to be a section chief in a lot of the sections that they had there. That's just the way that it is. And, luckily for us in the Marine Corps, that's not the case.
Right.
Because I can think back and I remember the very first time that I had my gun, that I was in charge of my own gun in Sierra Battery, I was still a Lance Corporal. I was a Lance Corporal in charge of a freaking $1 million piece of equipment. And they felt that they gave me enough responsibility to do that. And that's because of leadership that was able to teach us to ensure that we pass that knowledge on to those that are, that are going to follow us now that we are no longer in the Marine Corps, because now our knowledge is there. And I think the most thing that I took was that when I was down on the depot training those young kids into recruits, was that I'm training my future.
Correct.
They're the ones that are going to replace me. And especially those that were down there, because when I was down on the depot, that was during that time that we were actually increasing the manpower in the Marine Corps. So we were increasing everybody, so a lot of people were coming in. So I had a lot of what I like to call in my platoons, a lot of bullet sponges that came through. That's what I call them, a bullet sponge, because they were just there to take the bullet for the other ones because they weren't worth a crap being there. They were just going to graduate and go take a bullet for somebody in Iraq that deserved it.
Right.
Now I look back at that now and I laugh.
Yeah.
I laugh at that, but yeah, we're training our replacements.
And listen, and that's what makes us Marines. I'm not going to downgrade what other services do because they're our brother in arms, and it takes us all to complete the mission, right? But we're a different breed. That's why we're still here, because technically all the other services, right, can do everything that we do, right? They have planes, they have tanks, they have artillery, they have everything that we have and more. But what makes us different is we push responsibility down to the lowest man. We hold them accountable as we hold each other accountable. And I'm sure you remember doing joint ops with other services where they had to call back to make a decision. We're not built like that. We make sure that the lowest man on the totem pole, if put in a situation, can make that call. We empower him to do that. It is our responsibility to make him feel like he had the authority to do that, right? 80% solution. Nothing's going to be 100%, especially when the rubber meets the road. But just make a decision, move, and adjust once you move.
No, definitely. That is so true. Well, Gunner Sergeant Ramos, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to come on here on the podcast. And I'm pretty sure a lot of the listeners are going to send me an email and ask more questions. And more definitely, we're going to get you back just to share some more stories as we progress through our reading of our book, because a lot of people want to know the perspective from two different individuals of what actually went through. And who knows, maybe next couple weeks we can get into a little bit of stories down there from the trenches and our experiences down there, walking the streets down there wearing our campaign cover.
Exactly. And I just want to say this before I sign off. I thank you. I'm humbled that I even got an invitation to share your platform with you. And we mess with each other a lot, but I don't want anybody to take it seriously. If you were a drill instructor and you pushed any recruits, I don't care where you did it, Mars, Paris Island, San Diego, you're a special breed. It takes a special breed to be able to take on that responsibility, work those long hours, push those recruits, take them from raw material to hardened steel. So respect to anyone that ever wore the campaign cover. And I respect you, man, and I appreciate you once again for even inviting me on your platform. Thank you.
Likewise. And everybody remember to make sure you subscribe to his podcast down there, which again, they're going to remind us what your podcast name is so they make sure they can find it on the platforms.
The name of my podcast is Talks with Pops, and you can find it on anywhere you stream your platform from, Podbean, Apple Podcasts, iHeart, wherever you get your podcast from, you'll see it.
All right, Gunny Ramos, we greatly appreciate it, and thank you for taking your time and joining us here today on the Quarterdeck. Are you looking for a photographer who can capture the most important moments in your life? Look no further than Miguel Saenz Photography. Miguel Saenz is an award-winning photographer with a passion for capturing the beauty and emotions of weddings, family portraits, and special events. With years of experience and a creative eye, Miguel Saenz will create stunning images that you'll treasure for years to come. Whether you're looking for a traditional wedding album, a unique family portrait, or a professional headshot for your business, Miguel Saenz Photography has the expertise to bring your vision to life. From the initial consultation to the final product, Miguel Saenz will work with you every step of the way to ensure that your images reflect your unique style and personality. Don't settle for mediocre photographs that simply document an event. Trust Miguel Saenz Photography to create timeless images that capture the essence of your special moments. Book your session today and experience the magic of Miguel Saenz Photography. Visit Miguel Saenz Photography online at miguelsaenzphotography.com to see examples of his work and schedule your appointment today.
What we're gonna do right here is go back. Way back into time.
This week on the Quarterdeck, we're going to go ahead and continue our reading of our book with the 1st Marine Division in Iraq of 2003, No Greater Friend, No Worst Enemy. And this week, we're going to continue to find out how Wolfpack found its prey on the fight continuing on March 23rd, and how they're making their way all the way into Baghdad and not making it easy for the Iraqi forces as they do that. So let's go ahead and get into our reading of the book and find out exactly what the heck is going on with them during that day. In the lead of the division column, the Wolfpack cautiously picked its way up the route. They had seen signs of the enemy and knew that somewhere ahead was the screen of paramilitary fighters that stood between the division and the Tigris River. Warnings of booby traps, culverts, and minefields also gave them pause as they moved forward, checking for the enemy and assuming an ambush lay ahead. As darkness fell, the lead element spotted a suspicious situation and stopped to investigate. Realizing that they had just entered the killing zone of a deliberate ambush, the lead element opened up with a wall of lead just seconds before the enemy triggered the ambush. Within minutes of the entire column was engaging in a direct firefight with an Iraqi battalion-sized unit. Utilizing immediate action drills, combined arms, and controlled violence, the Wolfpack fought its way out of the ambush. Captain Charles Bloom, the Wolfpack Fire Support Coordinator, describes the scene. Wolfpack had departed TAA Fang in the morning of 23 March. We had been ordered to begin a recon up Highway 1 and the alternate routes called Lexus and Cobra. We had begun to move forward when the CO got a call from Chaos. The CG had told our CO to get up and Hantouche and the Highway 27 bridge over the Saddam Canal as rapidly as possible, and forget the alternate routes for now. As we pushed up, we definitely could feel we were getting well out in front of the division. We lost comms with the Dask A, and it was starting to get dark. We had some Cobras working in front of us earlier, and they had reported signs of enemy activity. Now, as we rolled up, we began to see abandoned weapons and equipment strewn all about along the highway. A suspicious vehicle was seen in our front and observed us as we sped away. ROE prevented engagement of the truck, and even though it was acting suspiciously, as it started to get dark, we could all feel the hair standing up in the backs of our necks. You could tell something was about to happen. Then, with Blackfoot, Bravo Company, in the lead, we began to see scattered tracers flying across the road in front of us from west to east. The scatter shots soon became a torrent of fire, and the entire battalion was engaged almost immediately. They opened up on us with mortars, heavy machine guns, and RPGs. The tracers would seamlessly explode when they hit the LAVs. It wasn't like the movies where they just bounced off. We later established the enemy at about an infantry battalion in size. There was fire coming from everywhere, and they were starting to mass and charge the columns in groups. We were pouring 7.62 and 25mm on them, but they kept coming. There was no communications with the DAS, and we were outside of artillery range, and there was no air station. Unable to reach the CO on the radio, and even though we were not in the immediate danger of being overrun, the air officer made a decision to call Slingshot over the guard channel. This brought in immediate CAS. Slingshot was a radio brevity code that indicated the American unit was about to be overrun, indicating all available fire support was to be vectored to its aid. Before we knew it, there was air coming from everywhere. There were too many sorties coming into control individually. As we established an east-west buffer of 2,000 meters off the road and in front of our column, and turned that fight over to FAC, With our grounded fact directing the traffic order, we estimate we got about 20 sections of fixed wing in support of us all night. The air support was overwhelming fires from the Wolfpack continued to effectively work over the Fideen until well into the night. The devastation was tremendous. Because of the geometry of the column, linearly arrayed along Highway 1, air was able to work to the north freely and found a company of Iraqi tanks. There were 10 T-55s, ready to hit a column of the eastern flank. The hunting was good that night, and 3rd MAW effectively shut down the ambush set along the portion of Highway 1, destroying several large enemy positions. Wolfpack received over 50 toady sorties of fixed and rotary wing support that night from Air Force and Marine aviators, making the enemy pay a heavy price for choosing to engage the enemy. Sergeant David Harrison III of Astoria, Oregon recalled his story. My vehicle served as the commanding officer's wingman, and it was my job as gunner to watch the battalion commander's back. As I watched the first round slam into the Blackfoot's flanks, I recall thinking, holy shit. Aside from the pucker factor, my training took over. The CO gave us the free guns order, and I tried to kill as many as I could to protect my wingman and myself. I began to engage with 25mm gun and watched throughout the thermal sights as groups of the attackers dropped. As the close air support checked in and began to attack, I had never seen air that close before. When it was all over, the battalion was in hasty defensive coil. We hit him, and we hit him hard. This attack marked the first major encounter of Fedayeen by the 1st Marine Division. The Wolfpack fiercely responded to enemy fighters so confused or eager to die that they repeatedly rushed the column of LAVs in the face of certain death. When it was over, there were over 150 enemy casualties, 10 T-55s, and several technical and heavy machine guns destroyed. There was 1 Marine slightly wounded in the attack. Lieutenant Colonel Clardy noted that the complete training and technological overmatch the LAR battalion had over the preliminary fighters, the Marines had thermal sights, long-range direct fire capability, armor protection, and fire discipline, he recounts. The Iraqis obviously had someone who knew what they were doing set up in an ambush position, but the guys they had executing it was really poor soldiers. We detected them and opened fire in just moments before they did, and that probably caused a lot of their first RPG's volleys to miss. After that, we had firepower dominance for the rest of the fight. The Iraqis were shocked by what they had hit, and I think they opened up a whole can of whoop ass when they didn't know how to deal with it. The controlled chaos within the Marines Division main CP during the fight was deliberate execution at its best. Major Hank Weed, the ground watch officer, received the call of slingshot and passed the word to the Killing U, as the U-shaped configuration of tables in the counter of the division CP was called. Immediate focus from every section of the Killing U was applied to assisting 3rd LAR's division fires immediately realized that 3rd LAR was out of artillery range. Radio operators cleared the TAC nets awaiting additional reports. The Division G3 Air Officer Major Grams Gramagula and Major Stinky Phillips went to work coordinating 3rd MAW's immediate response, which was to send 6 F-18s, 1 F-18D FAC, 2 F-15s, and 4 A-10s all the way, which arrived in the scene within 30 minutes. As word got passed that Marines were heavily engaged on the ground, pilots of available aircraft started checking into the division's direct air support center at a rapid rate, looking to assist. With 3rd MAW's superb immediate support, the situation was resolved in shorter order. It was a great exercise of confidence building both in product and in the ability of aviation fires to react immediately across the battle space. So as we can see, this is why the MACTAF, the Marine Air Ground Task Force, works so great for the Marine Corps, because we're able and capable of working with each other regarding what the situation is, and that's exactly what happened that night. Wolfpack needed support. They were out of range of artillery fire, so artillery was not able to fire support for them because we were so far back during that time and during that day. But they were able to engage the enemy with aircraft fire and overpower the enemy and ensure that they were successful in that fight. And they were able to overpower the enemy, even though that enemy was a larger battalion-sized force compared to the size of the Marines had. But they made one mistake. They underestimated the power of the Marines and still engaged them. And for that, they lost their life. Hero highlight. Major Everett Parker Pope was awarded the Medal of Honor for conspicuously gallantry on Peleliu in September of 1944, while leading his men in an assault of a strategic hill and for holding it with rocks and bare fist when ammunition ran low against Japanese suicide attacks. On 20 September 1944, Captain Pope and his company set out on a Storm Hill 154, a steep, barren, coral hill protruding from the face of Suicide Ridge. According to a field dispatch from TSG Joseph L. Ally of Buffalo, New York, a Marine Corps combat correspondent. From almost point-blank range, Japanese mortars and field guns opened up on them from adjoining peaks in Suicide Ridge. Captain Pope and his men took Hill 154 at dusk after hours of bloody fighting which nearly decimated the group. Forced to deploy his men thinly, he nevertheless determined to hold his ground for the night. Immediately after darkness fell, the Japanese started to attack. First, in small infiltrating bands, and when the units failed, in groups of 20 to 25 who tried storming the hill. Each time, the Marines opened fire with everything they had: one light machine gun, several Tommy guns and rifles, and a limited supply of hand grenades. When the grenades ran low, they hurled rocks. We would throw 3 or 4 rocks, then a grenade. The Japanese didn't know which were which, one Marine said. By sunrise, the Marines were beating off the enemy with bare fists and hurling ammunition boxes at them. Finally, only 8 riflemen remained. When daylight brought deadly fire, Captain Pope was ordered to withdraw. Everett Parker Pope was born 16 July 1919 in Milton, Massachusetts, but who later moved to North Quincy, Massachusetts. He graduated with honors from North Quincy High School in 1936. In June 1941, he received his Bachelor of Science degree upon graduation from Bowdoin College, Brunswick, Maine, where he was captain of the tennis team. He graduated magna cum laude with honors in French and designated in Phi Beta Kappa. On 1 November 1941, he was commissioned a second lieutenant in the United States Marine Corps Reserve. He trained at Quantico, Virginia, and New River, North Carolina. Prior to going overseas in June of 1942 with the 1st Battalion, 1st Marines, on 7 August 1942, as the leader of the machine gun platoon, he participated in landing and actionals at Guadalcanal. In 1943, he was transferred to Melbourne, Australia, with his unit. Later, he again went into combat as a company commander with the 1st Marines, 1st Marine Division, in Cape Gloucester, New Britain campaign, from December of 1943 to April 1944. In the mopping up operations which followed, he led a 14-man patrol, which in one day killed 20 and captured 7 of the enemy during a 12-mile trek over jungle trails. From 12/30 September 1944, he took part in action in Peleliu campaign, during which he earned the Medal of Honor and the Purple Heart. Although wounded in action on 20 September, he returned to duty the next day and remained overseas until November of 1944. He was promoted to major in January 1945 and assigned for 1 year as a student in the Japanese language course at Yale University. On 16 July 1946, he was assigned an inactive duty status in the Marine Corps and returned to his home and private employment in Massachusetts. There, he became affiliated with the Marine Corps Reserve and commanded the 2nd Infantry Battalion, United States Marine Corps Reserve, Hingham, Massachusetts, until August of 1950, when he was called to active duty with his battalion upon an outbreak of the Korean conflict. He served as executive officer of the 3rd Battalion, 2nd Marines at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, until September of 1951, when he was released to inactive duty and shortly thereafter resigned his commission in the Marine Corps. Mr. Pope passed away on 16 July of 2009 at the age of 90 in Bath, Maine. He was laid to rest in Arlington National Cemetery, Arlington, Virginia. The Quarterdeck. What a week, what a week. And here we are on the very last day of February, which just so happens to be a leap year. So we have one extra day in the month of February, which is good for me because yesterday I was able to celebrate my 47th birthday on this earth. And I got to tell you guys, man, it doesn't even feel like I missed a beat. It still feels like I am a young 18-year-old at heart, but my body says otherwise. But oh well, that's another story for another day. So again, hope everybody enjoyed the company of Gunnery Sergeant Walter Ramos and the stories that he was able to share with us, especially now that we're getting more and more into depth with our book with the 1st Marine Division in Iraq in 2003, because he one of the Marines that he was there with me on the ground with 511 Romeo Battery during the time when we crossed from Kuwait and headed into Iraq, and we were in the same unit, so we know and we saw exactly what we saw. And like he was telling all the stories of the things that he had, man, we all have our own different types of experience, and we'll make sure that we do a follow-up discussion with him to come back here on the podcast and, let us know a little bit more of the stories. And so me and him can go ahead and just talk a little bit more about what we went through and what we saw while we were down there on the ground during that time in Iraq. The 1st Marine Division is progressing along and doing its thing in our book. My goodness, Wolfpack. What can I say about Wolfpack? They were kicking ass going through there and making sure that they made it their way all the way where they needed to go. And it just so happens that not just them, but there's units throughout the service and the military that sometimes get into a little pickle, as I want to call it. They get into trouble, and there might not be some support close by, but that's one thing with the Marine Corps, with the MAGTAF, or the Marine Air Ground Task Force, that we work so well together with the ground and the air and all the fire supporting units that are out there, to include artillery. We work together so much, and we're just basically like we're one unit, and we're able to support each other no matter what. And that is what happened that day on 23 of March, that they needed the help immediately right away. And since artillery was out of range, air came into play, and air handled business and ensured that they were successful in their mission. In our hero highlights, we talked about another great warrior, another person that was out there that did some great and outstanding things. So it's truly, truly amazing. And just like I say every single week, our heroes that we're reading about in World War II, man, all of them did some great and outstanding things. But let's take a look at, Major Everett Parker Pope. My goodness. He continued to give the fight to the enemy with his bare hands, with rocks, with ammo cans. His Marines kept shooting ammo cans, literally throwing them ammo cans at the enemy in order for them to be able to protect their fighting position, and then continue to actually defend the attacks that were being thrown at them. So, man, it's just amazing the things that they did in order to ensure that they were successful, especially when they were running short on ammo. Can you imagine that, being there engaged in the enemy and watching them continue to attack and attack and attack, and you are running out of ammo? The feelings and whatever the heck was going through their minds at the time, like, man, good gosh. For the 1st Marine Division, as we're going to see a little bit further along in our story, we had a hard time with the supply trains, keeping up with us. We were starting to run a little bit low on ammo and all that stuff and everything, but back then I couldn't even imagine. I couldn't imagine them going through all that stuff like that, because they were being attacked constantly by the enemy in, large groups, 20 to 25 man groups, attacking them in the middle of the night. So that, must have been something that they had to go through. And I can just imagine if I was able to speak to that man when he was still alive, man, the stories that he would have told us to ensure that, that we understood. But again, like always, we continue the traditions, the heroism of all these Marines that came before us, and we continue to learn more and more. And next week, we'll look at our next Marine to ensure that we can follow along with his story of how he earned that Congressional Medal of Honor. And like always, I want to thank all my listeners, all my subscribers that continue to follow me every single week and listen to the episodes every single week as they come along. Thank you for your support. And anybody that is new, I appreciate you guys tuning in and listening to the podcast. And just make sure, don't forget to subscribe. Make sure that you share the podcast with other people so we can get more listeners and we can bring other guests onto the podcast and learn a little bit more about their stories and what they went through throughout the time that they were in the Marine Corps. Like always, you make sure you go to our Facebook page, The Quarterdeck with GunnySaenz. Feel free to leave us a comment, ask any questions, or if you're interested in being a guest on the podcast, please let me know. Sign up there, and we'll go ahead and coordinate with you to ensure that we can get you on the show and you'll be able to actually let us know your stories of when you were in the Marine Corps. Especially if any of you guys have any stories about the barracks or things that you guys did there in the barracks, living there, your experiences and things like that. Let us know so we can go ahead and get you on here as a guest and we can share these stories with our listeners, because there's so many people out there that really don't understand what life in the barracks is like and how Marines deal with all the time and everything that they have when they are living there. So until next week, this is Miguel, the GunnySaenz, sounding Liberty Call.
I do solemnly swear. That I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States.
against all enemies, foreign and domestic.